This little filthy offspring of Donald Trump. So I'm talking about Trump Jr. The other one, Eric, he has a hard time getting his shoes on in the morning. But Donald Trump Jr. has really been taught by his father all sorts of white supremacy, neo-Nazi shit. Don Trump Jr. is so fucking far into hate, he'll never get out, ever. And the truth is, I'm just guessing here, but I think the truth is he's just waiting for the old man to die so that he, Don Jr., can step into the void that this filthy, bloated bastard father of his will create once he's gone, and Don Trump Jr. can be the new hate icon of the United States. But there are calls in Australia for him to be denied entry into that state or into that country because of his promotion of white supremacy, misogyny, transphobia, and probably anti-Semitism too, even though his sister's a Jew by conversion. But that doesn't mean shit to Don Jr. So there are activists, human rights activists in Australia who are calling on that country to ban the little prick ahead of a visit next month. I think that's a very good idea because he's expected to visit Australia on June 11th during a trip this little prick is on, sponsored by Turning Point Australia. That's a group affiliated with this racist Nazi Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. See, these people need to spread their hatred and their ignorance and their filth and their degeneracy all over the world, just like a huge piss stain. That's what these people do. Look what Hitler did in Europe. Look at the stain. You ever watch those programs about the rise of Hitler on the History Channel or whatever? And when they show the maps, they show the stain. It looks like a huge ink blot or a blood stain or urine spreading over the map of Europe caused by Hitler. That's what Trump Jr.'s about. That's what Charlie Kirk's about. That's what the rest of these white devils are about. As of today, nearly 20,000 people had signed a petition calling for this little bastard to be banned from the country. Don't let him in. Why should they? Oh, free speech? Oh, horse shit. It's a different country, asshole. So if the little prick, Don Jr., does manage to weasel his way into Australia, he can certainly expect protests at this so-called event. The head of the campaign against racism and fascism in Australia said in a statement, quote, Donald Trump is a far-right agitator who spreads bigotry wherever he goes. His visit is likely to be a magnet for far-right and neo-Nazi groups across the city of Melbourne. So we will be there in numbers to send the message that people here reject and despise everything he stands for. Then this person added, Trump Jr. is a prominent far-right spokesperson famous for his aggressive racist and transphobic campaigning. He was an instrumental part of his father's 2016 presidential run and has since been part of attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, including the violence on January 6th. We are protesting him to stand against white supremacy, transphobia, and misogyny. Ooh. Now, this little bastard is known for his attacks on the transgender community, and he tries to be so funny. He's so fucking coked up. You know, I don't know how many people still use cocaine. I know millions of people do, or we wouldn't have the drug trade. But for those of us who experimented with it back in the 80s, I mean, really had a relationship with cocaine for a while, you know what happens because you saw it. You stopped in time. I stopped long before it ever had an effect on my brain. But we've seen, I watched several friends here in Atlanta run businesses up their nose, run Audis up their nose, run huge bank accounts up their nose, and then die. And it was a real shame. Cocaine crazy is a real thing. It really does eventually make you insane. That's where Donald Trump now resides, in coke insanity. And among the crazy shit that he thinks is funny that he said this: there are 9,276 genders and I can't list them all. Oh, Don Jr., you little bastard. That is so funny. Let me pause for a minute while I laugh. Oh, okay. Thank you. And then this racist prick, Nigel Farage is expected to join the little prick during his visit. Farage said, quote, "This is a blatant attack on freedom of speech and political expression in Victoria." They always do that, don't they? How many times have we talked about that on this podcast? How Nazis will use the Constitution of the country they are seriously attempting to overthrow. They'll use that country's Constitution to protect themselves while they destroy that Constitution. And sure, people have legal rights, but, as usual, you don't need to be a weatherman to tell which way the wind is blowing. So when some little degenerate prick, coked out freak like Don Jr. wants to go to a different country to spread his brand of hatred, freedom of speech, in my opinion, doesn't apply. Fuck all that. I'm serious. I'm serious. Freedom of speech, to me, does not mean having the right to attempt to destroy that which gives you freedom of speech. I mean, come on. That is a kind of circular madness that makes no sense whatsoever. It's a human thing. And it should be stopped dead cold. That's just my opinion. The head of the National Union of Students in Australia, Grace Hill, who not only condemned this little bastard's planned visit, but she also said this, quote, "Turning Point USA has fought to crush through bans on abortion and attacks on trans rights across the U.S. We will not let them get a foothold in Australia. Donald Trump Jr. and Nigel Farage have said they're coming to Australia to fight what they call woke culture. We plan to show them that there is a serious, large left movement here willing to stand up to bigotry in all its forms." Hill added this, quote, "It's disgraceful that the Liberal Party is allowing one of their senators to speak alongside a well-known white supremacist, transphobe, and conspiracy theorist. Alex Antic should be immediately sacked," end quote. Now, since you and I don't know who in the hell Alex Antic is, I would assume he's a member of the Australian Senate. So, for people listening to this podcast in Melbourne, as though you had to listen to this podcast to know when this demonstration is planned, I'll tell you anyway, if the little bastard is allowed to slime his way into your country, the protest is planned for July 11th at 5:30 in the afternoon at the State Library in Victoria. Okay? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.